Hi, how are you? How much does your van weigh? It's just under 3.5 tons? Yeah, I thought you might say that. Are you sure? Is that a bit of wishful thinking? You can't possibly have added over 1,000 kilos to your van, can you? Might you be burying your head in the sand a little? I'm Ben. Welcome back to Diamonds on Tour. If you've converted a 3.5 ton panel van, I think you'll want to hear some of this. And if you're lucky enough to still be at the looking for the right empty van stage, then you will definitely want to stay around for this one. The consequences of running a van over its maximum allowable mass can be serious. If the DVSA or the police spot you on the road looking a bit floppy around the corners or flabby on your springs, then they can pull you over for a spot check. The fine for an overweight vehicle can be over £300, and they can also seize the vehicle if they need to. If you don't have a Class C1 driving licence, then they can also do you for that, driving without the right licence, and also you'll be done for driving without insurance, because your insurance is going to be dependent on having the right licence to drive the vehicle. The consequences can also be far more serious than that. If you're overweight, then your brakes and suspension will possibly be overloaded, and your wheels and tyres can suffer too. The van won't handle safely, and you won't be able to stop as well as you should, all leading to dangerous risks. I thought our van was likely to be a bit on the flabby side, so I wanted to weigh it just to make sure. There are loads of public weigh bridges all over the UK. Have a look on the internet and you'll see where they are. The nearest one to us costs just £11 for a fully certified weight report. I think that's great value. Here we are then, on our way to get this old van weighed. We're going to the public weigh bridge, which is at the local tip here in Cannock. First going to stop off some fuel to make sure the fuel tank is completely full, so that the van is pretty close to being as heavy as I can particularly get it. Diesel first. Right, that's the diesel tank full. I've already filled up all the water tanks. I've also filled the grey waste tank, and I've also filled the toilet just with water, you'll be pleased to know. Basically all of that, and I've loaded it up with most stuff. There's some provisions and things that we haven't got, but generally most of the stuff is full, so the van is at its pretty much at its maximum weight. And I'm on the way now down to the local weigh bridge at the tip, and we're going to see how much this thing weighs and then start the process of upgrading the weight if we need to. Okay, I'll see you in a minute at the weigh bridge. Beautiful sunny day, isn't it? I'm sure a lot of you will recognise this location if you're ever in this area of Cannock in Staffordshire. Here we are then. So this is the local refuse tip, which is where there's also a landfill site. So because they have huge great trucks coming in and out full of waste, they've got a weigh bridge and it's available for public use. So fingers crossed I can just drive onto the weigh bridge and they can tell us how much this thing is. Oh, there, mate. Any chance of getting this weighed?
Do you want me to tell you, or do you want a ticket?
Ticket.
It's £11 for a ticket.
Yep.
Cash
Yep,
as well, yeah?
yep, no problem. And does that give front and rear axles separately as well?
No, but I can always write that on the ticket if you want me to.
That would be useful, yeah.
You do the full weight first,
Yeah.
and then we'll sort that out.
The guy who's going to, it might need upgrading on the weight, and the engineer who did it said he wants a photograph of it on the weighbridge with the weights visible as well. Can I take a picture of it on the bridge at least?
So what the fuck do you do?
I'll only take 2 seconds.
If you want to do a front and rear axle, you're going to have to
Ah, right.
do it on the other side or something, won't we?
I can go round and back on if you like.
I think so. I'm going to have to get rid of it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And do I park at the back end of it then?
Yes, so when you come round, just stop with the front axle and I'll write that down. Then do
Ah, right. Got you. Got you. Cheers.
Right. So it's £11, yeah?
Yep.
11. Right, okay, so I've put a ring around the total weight there, 4060.
Okay.
And I've written front axle, rear axle there, and the charge £11. If you
Perfect.
can just sign it next to your name there.
Perfect. Thanks. That's a bit heavier than I was expecting. That is.
Where's yours?
I think 408 is the most it can go up to. So
Oh, is it?
yeah. So that's a stroke of luck.
Don't put your lunch in and then
Yeah,
you're
absolutely. Perfect. Thanks a lot for your help. Cheers. Well, there you go. So it's been well worth weighing this thing, because right now in its current form it's 4,060 kilos. So that makes it 560 kilos overweight if it's still a 3.5 ton van. So it is going to be necessary to upgrade the weight. So yeah, that's a lot more than I was expecting. So yeah, interesting. So I'll get off with the paperwork, get the engineering company to do all the necessary, and we'll get it upgraded so that we're legal on the road again. So knowing that our van is likely to be heavy, I'd already fitted operated leaf springs at the back. These 2+1 springs from Sanderson Leaf Springs have a higher capacity, and while they haven't made the van any harder riding, it has lifted the rear suspension by about 50mm, so it's now back to the correct ride height. There's a link to Sanderson in the description below. Okay, so that's the spring bolted in both ends. You can see it's fixed up here and at the other end on the hanger. So that's now in place, bolted in. We've now got to do the centre connection onto the axle. You see the advantage of taking off the brake caliper, gives us all this space. Without that, this hose is quite tight across here and you risk knocking onto the spring here. I've also disconnected the anti-roll bar hanger and the shock absorber, because that allows the axle to come down that bit further to give even more space here. Now in here you can you see that little pin that's on the bottom edge of the spring? That engages with a hole in the top of the axle, but it's important that this is aligned perfectly centre to the axle and also left right, so that pin engages, and then the U-bolts go over the top and clamp it all together. The sumo springs that I fitted a while ago are still doing a great job, making the whole vehicle generally far more compliant. I expect this is going to be quite stiff. A little bit of wiggling. There you go. I've also fitted new brake discs and pads all round from EBC. These are a great addition, and with a change of brake fluid have improved the stopping distance and general confidence in the brakes. So now that I know our van is 560 kilos overweight, we need to get it sorted properly. I've used the services of Vanlife Engineering to help sort it out and to get me legal again. Dee is fabulous to deal with and is incredibly knowledgeable on this subject. When you look at the plate on your van, it tells you the maximum allowed weight on each axle, as well as the maximum weight for the whole vehicle. You'll notice that the sum of the two axle weights is more than the 3,500 kilos maximum vehicle weight. Now that's because here in the UK the driving licence requirements change at 3.5 tonnes. So these vans are all plated at 3.5 tonnes to enable people to be able to drive them on a standard car licence without doing any further tests. I've got no idea how all that works in other countries, but I'm sure there's something similar elsewhere. Now in the UK, before 1997, you could drive up to a 7.5 tonne vehicle on a car driving licence, but as that's a pretty big vehicle to drive with no additional training, that weight limit was reduced way back then. Us grown-ups that passed our driving tests before 1997 can still drive vehicles up to 7.5 tonnes with the grandfather rights that we've got. But some of you youngsters out there who got your driving licence after 1997 will need to do an additional test, a Class C1 driving test, to enable you to drive a vehicle over 3.5 tonnes. Now that's why it's quite a big problem if you don't have a C1 driving licence and your van's overweight, because you are actually driving a vehicle you're not licensed to drive, meaning that you don't have valid insurance either. So basically, your van is capable of working safely up to the combined weight of both axle weights. In our case that's 4,080 kilos, and as you saw earlier, ours weighs 4,060 kilos when it was absolutely full, including all water and diesel tanks filled to the brim. I'm happy that we will never run the van with that much weight on board, so our van can be safely uplated to its maximum axle weight capacity. The uprated rear springs and brakes are not essential, but I would advise doing that if you're going to be running a van like this up at that weight. With a camper van conversion, we're running at full capacity all the time, so give your suspension the best chance it can. Now by uprated suspension, I do not mean lifted. A lift kit simply lifts and doesn't add any additional capacity. In fact, the weight of the lift kit itself will reduce the payload that you have available. Uprated suspension means stronger, not taller. Upplating our van to over 3,500 kilos does mean that nobody with a post-1997 car driving licence can drive it. That's not a problem for us, but it is definitely something you should consider. Getting a Class C1 driving licence is actually not difficult at all. It's also something that Vanlife Engineering can help with, put you in touch with the right people. It can be done from as little as £400, and it's really easy if you've already got some experience driving a van of this size. My daughter actually recently did it because she's an ambulance paramedic and needed a C1 to be able to drive an ambulance, and she said it was no problem at all. Now there's also a few other things to consider. We've already registered this van as a motor caravan. Now this was a crazy process of bureaucracy. Anybody who's tried this will confirm that it's a very antiquated process. There's a big checklist of things that you need to evidence with photographs of all the camper van features, cooking facilities, fitted seating, fitted bed, storage, and also camper van style graphics on the outside. And that's why our van is now sporting some bougie new stripes. Anyway, a vehicle registered as a motor caravan has no weight limit in terms of its MOT class. In the UK, pretty much all of our vehicles have to have an annual MOT test, and that's a safety check done at a registered test centre. It's called MOT because the government department that used to manage all this used to be called the Ministry of Transport. Now, normal cars and personal vehicles up to 3 tonnes have a Class 4 MOT test. Now that's the standard one which we all know and love. Commercial vehicles over 3 tonnes go into different classes, And if your camper van is still registered as a panel van or a van with windows or some of the other classifications they come up with, then it will need to have a Class 7 MOT test. Now these are more expensive and more detailed tests, and there are fewer test centres that can do Class 7 MOT tests. As a motor caravan, you'll still be able to have a Class 4 MOT, which is much easier and cheaper to achieve. This change has made no difference to the cost of our insurance. Our insurance company just wanted confirmation that all the drivers will have Class C1 entitlement on their licence. Now, being over 3.5 tonnes also means that you have to fit those death angle stickers to your van if you're going to be driving in France. It's a pain, it's a necessary evil, just like the diagonal red and white board that you have to have on the back of the van if you've got anything sticking out. So it's a pain, but they are really cheap and they'll come off again when we leave France. The process of upplating the van was extremely easy, really very straightforward with the help of Dee at Vanweight Engineering. There's a link in the description to their website which explains everything. It costs from £230 plus VAT, but don't hold us to that price because yours might be different. Dee prepares all of the necessary documents and a very detailed engineer's report that shows you why your van is safe to be replated at the higher weight. You just sign all the documents and send them off to the DVLA and wait a few weeks for your new logbook showing your new weight. You get a smart new plate to attach to your van to show its new weight. That's why this process is called upplating, because you're fitting a plate that has a higher weight written on it. A couple of other things you also need to get an exemption from a tachograph. Commercial vehicles need tachographs to be able to monitor drivers' hours, but of course as a private vehicle we don't. So one of the forms that you fill in is a tachograph exemption. If you need a weight capacity of more than the combined axle weights of your van, then it can get far more complicated and costly. You could switch out the rear axle for a twin rear wheel axle, but that also needs significant mechanical surgery because you then need to be able to fit 2 wheels on either side of your axle. That wasn't an option for us because of the cost and the interior space that you'd lose with the additional wheel arches you'd have to build to accommodate those rear wheels. You could upgrade the front suspension for the heavy-duty ambulance specification spring, but these are hard to find, they're expensive to fit, and only when you're 150 kilos at the end of the vehicle that's not doing any of the heavy lifting. Because it's a lot of cost and there's no real gains, it's not really recommended to do that. Or you could put your current van on a diet and win you a little bit more wiggle room. That was our option with the van only pretty much full. It was only 20 kilos under its new maximum weight. That's not much wiggle room, but it was probably at least 80 kilos of extra water in it when I weighed it. With hindsight, if I knew all of this when I started our van build, I would not have used a 3.5 tonne van as the base. I would have found a dually or a 4x4 with a 5 tonne rating to use as the base for our van. It's too late for that now. Every day really is a school day. Perhaps there'll be a version 2 of this van in the future. But if you're lucky enough to be at the finding the right empty van stage of your build, have a really good think about this. You really do have very little weight capacity to play with, especially in a long wheelbase van. And that's because there is simply more steel in a long wheelbase van than there is in the medium. So the van itself, when it's empty, weighs a lot more. So that gives you less capacity to play with, up to the 3.5 tonnes maximum allowable mass. Now I'll just note as well that we've not put anything crazy in this van. The water tanks are not huge and we're not carrying anything that's unreasonable. I reckon virtually all self-converted vans will be right up there, and as we were 560 kilos overweight, without doing anything over the top, I would urge you to get your van weighed and stay safe and legal. You're not going to save 560 kilos from your van with a few tweaks here and there, or a bit of lightweight ply versus normal plywood. Many of the van conversions you see out there use things like steel spare wheel carriers and roof racks, and people tile their bathrooms and even use Belfast sinks in their kitchens. That all looks great, but it's also really heavy. Everything that we've used has taken weight into account. We made everything on the outside from aluminium and other lightweight materials throughout. Dee sums this up really well. He says there are 2 types of self-converted camper vans. There are the ones that are overweight, And then there are the ones that haven't yet been weighed. Oh, thanks very much for watching. I hope I haven't given you a headache with this one. I know it's a contentious topic and something that's not really spoken about very much. There is potential to light up the comment section with this one, but just remember, everything that I've said here is absolute facts. There's no opinion here. This is factual information. I was certainly surprised when I weighed our van and found it to be 560 kilos over. It has actually been a very easy and relatively cheap thing to sort out properly, and that's given us so much more peace of mind. There really are no excuses for not sorting your weight out properly. Get your van legal and safe. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you. It would be great if you could subscribe, and you can do that by clicking over here somewhere. And if you want to see any more of our van build videos, there's a playlist down here somewhere. So thanks for watching. See you next time.